Everybody, welcome to our open book. Very good to be with you. How's this new technology working? Let us know, okay? We have a particularly distinguished member of our crew here today, Elise Sylvie, GMA, Truffaut, Spielberg, Simon, overlooking this new technology. What do you think so far?
It's cool.
All right. So I've been working on a book about animals, and they're important to our family. And I have discovered a book. I'm going to read from it tonight. The very beginning, James Bowen. It's a British book, A Street Cat Named Bob: How One Man and His Cat Found Hope on the Streets. And it's quite moving. It's a real story. James Bowen, a musician, has notably had addiction problems. Let me just let him speak for himself. Here's how the book begins. Seemed like a nice thing to read on a rainy Saturday night. Fellow travelers, there's an old adage I read somewhere. It says each of us is given a second chance every day of our lives. They're there for the taking. It's just that we usually don't take them. I spent a significant chunk of my life proving how true those words are. I was given a lot of opportunities, sometimes on a daily basis. For a long time, I failed to take any of them. But then in the early spring of 2007, that began to change. It was then that I befriended Bob. Looking back on it, something tells me it might have been his second chance, too. I first encountered him on a gloomy Thursday evening in March. London hadn't quite shaken off the winter, and it was still bitingly cold on the streets, especially when the winter winds blew in from the Thames. There'd even been a hint of frost in the air that night, which is why I'd arrived back at my new sheltered accommodation in Tottenham, north of London, a little earlier than usual after a day busking around Covent Garden. As normal, I had my black guitar case and rucksack slung over my shoulders. This evening, I also had my closest friend Bill with me. We'd gone out together years ago, but we're just mates now. We were going to eat a cheap takeaway curry and watch a movie on the small black and white television set I'd managed to find at a charity shop around the corner. As usual, the lift in the apartment block wasn't working, so we headed up the first flight of stairs, resigned to making the long trudge up 5 floors. The strip lighting in the hallway was broken. Part of the ground floor was swathed in darkness, but as we made our way to the stairwell, I couldn't help noticing a pair of glowing eyes in the gloom. When I heard a gentle, slightly plaintive meowing, I realized what it was. Edging closer, in half-light, I could see a ginger cat curled up on a doormat outside one of the ground floor flats in the corridor that led off the hallway. I'd grown up with cats and always had a bit of a soft spot for them. As I moved in, I could tell it was a tom. I hadn't seen him around the flats before, but even in the darkness, I could tell there was something about him. I could already tell he had something of a personality. He wasn't in the slightest bit nervous. In fact, completely the opposite. He was quiet and flappable. It looked like he was very much at home here in the shadows, and to judge by the way he was fixing me with a steady, curious, intelligent stare, I was the one who was straying into his territory. It was as if he was saying, "So who are you, and what brings you here?" I couldn't resist kneeling down and introducing myself. "Hello, mate. I've not seen you before. Do you live here?" I said. He just looked at me with the same studious, slightly aloof expression. I decided to stroke his neck, partly to make friends, but partly to see if he was wearing a collar or any form of identification. It was hard to tell in the dark, but I realized there was nothing. He was a stray. London had more than its fair share of those. He seemed to be enjoying the affection and began brushing himself lightly against me. As I petted him a little more, I could feel his coat was in poor condition, with uneven bald patches here and there. He was clearly in need of a good meal. Poor chap, I think he's a stray. He's not got a collar and he's really thin, I said, looking up at Belle, who was waiting patiently by the foot of the stairs. She knew I had a weakness. No, James, you can't have him, she said, nodding toward the door of the flat. The cat was sitting outside. He can't have just wandered in here and settled on the spot. He must belong to whoever lives there, probably waiting for them to come home and let him in. Reluctantly, I agreed with her. Besides, the last thing I needed was the extra responsibility of a cat. I was a failed musician, a recovering drug addict living a hand-to-mouth existence in sheltered accommodation. Taking responsibility for myself was hard enough. The following morning, I headed downstairs to find the Ginger Tom still sitting there. Once again, I dropped down on one knee and stroked him. Once again, it was obvious that he loved it. He was purring away, appreciating the attention. He hadn't learned to trust me 100%, but I could tell he thought I was okay. In the daylight, I could see he was a gorgeous creature. He had a really striking face, amazingly piercing green eyes, although looking closer, I could tell. Must have been in a fight or an accident because there were scratches on his face and legs. But again, I told myself I had more than enough to worry about getting myself straightened out. So more than a little reluctantly, I headed off to catch the bus to Tottenham, to central London and Covent Garden, where I was going to try once more and earn a few quid busking. By the time I got back that night, it was pretty late, almost 10 o'clock. I immediately headed for the corridor where I'd seen the Ginger Tom, but there was no sign. Part of me was disappointed. I'd taken a bit of shine to him, but mostly I felt relieved. I assumed he must have been let in by his owner when they got back, from wherever it was they had been. My heart sank a bit when I went down again the next day and saw him back in the same position again. By now, he was slightly more vulnerable and disheveled than before. He looked cold and hungry, was shaking a little. Still here then, I said, stroking him, not looking so good today. I made up my mind immediately. Okay, mate, you're coming with me, I said, digging into my rucksack for the box of biscuits I carried specifically to give treats to cats and dogs that approached me when I was busking. I rattled it at him. He was immediately on all fours, following me. I could see he was a bit uneasy on his feet and was carrying one of his back legs. So we took our time climbing the 5 flights of stairs. My flat was threadbare, it's fair to say. Apart from the telly, all I had was a secondhand sofa, a mattress in the corner of the small bedroom, and in the kitchen area, a half-working refrigerator, a microwave, a kettle. There was no cooker. The only other thing in my flats were my books, videos, and knickknacks. I fished out some milk from the fridge, poured it into a saucer, and mixed it with a bit of water. I knew that, contrary to popular opinion, milk can be bad for cats because, in fact, they are lactose intolerant. Lapped it up in seconds. After the cold and dark of the corridor, the flat was 5-star luxury as far as the Tom was concerned. He seemed pleased to be there. He headed for the living room and curled up on the floor near the radiator. I sat and watched him carefully, and there was no doubt that there was something wrong with his leg. Surely enough, when I sat on the floor next to him and started examining him, I found he had a big abscess on the back of his rear right leg. The wound was with the size of a large canine tooth, which gave me a good idea of how he got it. Probably been attacked by a dog or possibly a fox. He also had a lot of scratches on his face not far from his eye, and others on his coat and legs. I sterilized the wound as best I could by putting him in the bathtub, then putting some non-alcoholic moisturizer around the wound, some Vaseline on the wound itself. A lot of cats would have created havoc if I had tried to treat them like that, but he was as good as gold. He spent most of the rest of the day curled up in what was already his favorite spot near the radiator. But he also roamed around the flat a bit every now and again, jumping up and scratching whatever he could find. Having ignored it earlier on, he now began to find the mannequin in the corner a bit of a magnet. I didn't mind. He could do whatever he liked. I spent the evening watching television. The Tom curled up by the radiator, seemingly content. He only moved when I went to bed, picking himself up and following me into the bedroom, where he wrapped himself up into a ball at my feet, the edge of my bed. As I listened to his gentle purring in the dark, it felt good to have him there. He was company, I guess. I hadn't had a lot of that lately. Sunday morning, I got up and decided to hit the streets to see if I could find his owner. I figured someone must have stuck up a lost cat poster. There was almost always a photocopied appeal for the return of a missing pet plastered on local lampposts, notice boards, and even bus stops. There seemed to be so many missing Moggies. There were times I wondered whether there was a catnapping gang at work. Just in case I found the owner quickly, I took the cat with me, attaching him to a leash I'd made out of a shoelace to keep him safe. He was happy to walk to my side as we took the stairs to the ground floor. Outside the block of flats, the cat began pulling on the string lead as if he wanted to head off. I guessed he wanted to do his business. Sure enough, he headed into a patch of greenery and bushes adjoining a neighboring building and disappeared for a minute or two to heed nature's call. He then returned to me and happily slipped back into the lead. He must really trust me, I thought to myself. I immediately felt I had to repay that trust. My first port of call was the lady who lived across the street. She was known locally for looking after cats. She fed the neighborhood strays and got them neutered if necessary. When she opened the door, I saw at least 5 cats living inside. Goodness knows how many more she had out the back. It seemed that every cat for miles headed to her backyard, knowing it was the best place to get some food. I didn't know how she could afford to feed them all. She saw the Tom and took a shine to him straight away, offering him a little treat. She was a lovely lady, but didn't know anything about where he'd come from. She had not seen him around the area. I bet he's come from somewhere else in London. Wouldn't surprise me if he's been dumped, she said. She said she'd keep her eyes and ears open in case she heard anything. I got a feeling she was right about him being from somewhere far from Tottenham. Out of interest, I took the cat off his lead to see if he knew what direction to go in, but as we walked the streets, it was obvious. He didn't know where he was. He seemed completely lost. He looked at me as if to say, I don't know where I am. I want to stay with you. Cats have a great sense of direction, but he'd obviously been let loose far from a home and hadn't gone back. Or maybe he'd known that it wasn't really home at all and decided to find a new one. My other theory was that he'd belonged to an old person who had passed away. London has always had a large population of street cats. Strays who wander the streets, living off scraps and the comfort of strangers. 500 or 600 years ago, places like Gresham Street in the city, Clerkenwell Green and Drury Lane used to be known as cat streets and were overrun with them. These strays are the flotsam and jetsam of the city, running around fighting for survival on a daily basis. A lot of them were like this Ginger Tom, slightly battered, broken creatures. Maybe he'd spotted a kindred spirit in me.
Oh, that's lovely.
It's really nice. I might read a little bit more of it tomorrow from a later section in the book, which is how I discovered the book. James Bowen, who has had his problems since the book came out, and Bob, of course, didn't last forever. But It's a
They took
wonderful
care of
book.
each other.
They took care of each other. It's a wonderful book, and it's had several iterations, I gather, a special children's version. Oh, it's really nice to read that. So thank you very much for being with us on our open book. Let us know how the new technology is working. We will try it with a guest sometime in the next few days. And what do you think, ESJMS?
We still have to figure out how to get the chats.
Do
I'm
people-
working on that. No, it's not working, but we're working on that.
Yeah, working on that. So thanks very much for being with us tonight in our open book. We'll see you later. Take care.